You know, up until this point, I only have 2 dessert videos on my channel, and one of them is a healthy, low-calorie dessert video. I guess technically that means I only really have 1 video. So today we're up in the count with a classic dessert, cannolis. Let's do it. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dishes and Fishes, where I show you how to cook instead hooks. Today we're gonna make one of the most iconic handheld Italian desserts, the cannoli. And we're gonna make 2 different types of cannolis. We're gonna make the traditional chocolate chip, white filling, delicious cannoli that everyone loves. And we're gonna make one cannoli that I've put my own spin on, the maple bourbon cannoli. The Italian traditionalists will probably have their way with me in the comments, but I think I'm ready for it. So let's get into it. Alright guys, in order to make our filling, we're going to need to use some ricotta cheese, or ricotta, as people in Connecticut like to say. I'm using the 4-cup container, and I'm going to strain that through a cheesecloth and a mesh sieve overnight preferably, but at least for a few hours while I make the dough and other things for the cannolis. So to make our dough, we're going to start with 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of sugar, and a teaspoon of salt. We're going to give those dry ingredients a quick mix just to get them evenly distributed, and then we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of cubed butter. Using a pastry blender or a fork or your fingers, you're going to just cut those cubes of butter into the dough, sort of like you're making biscuits, and once they're all mixed together, it should look like this with little peas of butter throughout the dough. Once you have the butter distributed, we're going to make a small well. Into the well, we're going to add 2 egg yolks, and as we get these egg yolks, we're going to save the egg whites to the side. So I'm going to pop in my 2 egg yolks, followed by 1/2 cup of Marsala wine. This is going to give our dough that nice bubbly feel after we fry it. I'm going to fold those ingredients together carefully and kind of just give them a quick mix. This dough will kind of resemble biscuit dough. Don't worry, it'll come together. I'm going to let that rest on my cutting board for 10 minutes so the flour can hydrate, and then I'm going to just knead the dough for about 8 to 10 minutes until it comes together. Just keep kneading it until the dough becomes smooth. You'll see that it starts to change color and to form a yellow dough. If you knead for 8 to 10 minutes and it still feels dry, you can add some olive oil just to moisten it up a little bit if need be. And that's pretty much it, guys. Cannoli dough. So after 8 to 10 minutes of kneading, the dough should be smooth like this. I'm going to just cover that in plastic wrap and let it rest on my counter for at least 1 hour to let those gluten strands relax. After our dough has rested for at least 1 hour, it should be soft. I have to cut mine in half because my work surface is small, but we're just going to take our time and begin to roll our dough out onto a work surface as large and thin as you can get it. I like to roll these cannolis pretty thin. And then using a ring mold, we're going to cut out as many cannolis as you can get. This recipe makes about 14 to 18 cannolis if you're careful. And try not to waste a lot of dough. You can see I screwed up the center here, but that's okay. The extra dough you can roll back up, roll it into a ball, let it rest on your counter again, and then repeat the process in order to not waste dough. Then you're going to need these cannoli making tools. You can get them on Amazon for like 10 bucks. And using those egg whites that I whipped with 1 tablespoon of water from earlier, we're going to just roll the dough around the cannoli rings, brush them with the egg whites, and then roll them up. You want to make sure when you roll them that you don't necessarily press the dough on the cannoli maker too hard, or else it will stick. The only place you really want to press down is on the seam, so just make sure that it's nice and sealed. If it bursts apart in the fryer, it's not the end of the world. You can just make a cannoli taco with it. If you don't have the cannoli makers, you can do this with a piece of foil. Just roll up a piece of aluminum foil. This obviously isn't as glorious as a cannoli maker, but it will work. As you can see, I just do the same process. Just make sure you use a shorter piece of aluminum foil than I did here. We're going to get some oil heated up to 375 degrees. And then drop in our cannolis, and we're going to fry those until they're golden brown. It's better to over fry these than under fry them, because over frying them is going to give them an extra crunch. So once they're golden brown, I'd give them another 10 to 15 seconds just so they're extra crispy, but just don't burn them. Here's me frying the one in foil. You can see that I left the foil a little bit too long for my small sauce pot, and now my cannoli shell will be bent a little bit. Whatever, you get the point. The foil will work. If you don't have the cannoli rings, like I said, definitely just use foil. You can also cook these things in the air fryer. Let those cool in a wire rack for at least an hour. So we're going to make 2 different types of cannoli filling. So my 4 cups of ricotta cheese, I'm going to split into 2 bowls. Let's start with our original. So to our 2 cups of ricotta cheese, I'm going to add 1/2 cup of powdered sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And that's it. I'm going to whisk that around. You can add chocolate chips or whatever you'd like. I'm going to just finish it with a pinch of salt and call it a day. Keep it very simple. If you don't have pastry bags, you can use freezer bags. I'm going to just put my filling into a freezer bag for filling the cannolis later on and set that in my fridge. For the classic cannolis, we're going to make a simple chocolate ganache. So I'm going to start with half a cup of heavy cream in a saucepan and get that heated up. Don't boil this. You want to just heat it to about 180 degrees till it's just about boiling. And then we're going to pour that over equal parts chocolate chips, in this case 1/2 cup. And I'm going to let that hot cream steep over the chocolate chips for 3 to 4 minutes so it can all get melty. After 3 to 4 minutes, I'm going to start whisking that together. Those chocolate chips should break down very easily. Continue to whisk that, and once it starts to come together, I'm going to add a tablespoon of butter and a pinch of sea salt. The butter will make this nice and glossy. The sea salt will enhance the flavor, and just whisk that until it's all together, nice and silky like this. You can use chocolate ganache for a million things in the dessert world. I've also stuffed cannolis with whipped ganache. Great thing to remember in your dessert knowledge bank. Once our ganache has cooled slightly but is still in liquid state, I'm going to dunk half of the cannoli shells in it using some tweezers, and I'm going to set those aside on a piece of wax paper so they can harden up. You can dunk the entire shell if you want to. I just like doing half. I think it looks really nice. And then I'm going to set those in my refrigerator so they can harden up. And yes, these look fire. When I'm ready to serve the cannolis, I'll pipe in my filling. Start from one half and fill it up, then move to the other half and fill it up from that side. You can't put too much filling in these things. And once they're filled, I'm going to dunk one half of them into some chocolate chips, and that's the finished product. Now moving on to the maple bourbon cannolis. I'm using this bourbon that's famous for dipping the bottles in red wax. They don't need my publicity, but if they want my publicity, they can reach out in the comments or on my Instagram or through email, and we can discuss. Basically, you just want to use some good mid-shelf bourbon. Nothing too expensive, but nothing bad. I'm going to put 1/2 cup of that bourbon into a saute pan and begin to cook it down to remove the alcohol. Should reduce by at least half. I like to just kind of smell the fumes, and when the fumes no longer smell like alcohol and burn your nostrils, it's done. So I'm going to take that off the stove and put it into a container where it can cool in my refrigerator while I do the other stuff. For our maple bourbon icing, we're going to use 8 ounces of cream cheese, our 1/2 cup of cooled bourbon, and 1/2 cup of real maple syrup. It's definitely a better idea to whisk the maple syrup and cream cheese first, then add your bourbon. I was rushing, dumped them all in at the same time, and you can see I wasn't able to achieve a nice smooth icing for like 10 minutes of whisking. It'll be way less work if you whisk the maple syrup and cream cheese first, but either way, this icing is very simple and it's so good on cookies, pastries, and cannolis. Definitely keep it in your arsenal. And for our filling, we're just going to add 1 cup of that icing to our 2 cups of ricotta cheese and mix that around, and that is our maple bourbon filling for our cannolis. You can also add a few more tablespoons of maple syrup if you want it to be a little bit sweeter. To accompany our maple bourbon cannolis, we're going to need some bacon, and I'm going to start by just frying off a package of bacon in the oven on a sheet tray. You're only going to need about 5 pieces of bacon, but no one cooks just 5 pieces of bacon. So I'm going to roast that at 375 for about 18 to 20 minutes until it's nice and crispy. I'm going to drain off the fat, let it cool, and then I'm going to chop up my bacon into very small chunks. This is why we have to cook the bacon first, so we can kind of get it into a finer texture. So chop the bacon up into bacon bits and then set it aside. When we're ready to serve these cannolis, we'll pipe in our maple bourbon filling into the cannolis the same way we did the original ones. And we're going to set those aside till we stuff them all. And then we're going to dunk both halves into the chopped bacon. This is kind of a guilty pleasure sweet treat for me. The sweetness and saltiness, I think, as we all know, goes awesome together. And this is definitely a unique take on cannolis, but it is delicious. After all your cannolis are stuffed, you can go ahead and pipe your remaining icing over the top in whatever design you see fit. I'm just going to do squiggles. And that's it, guys. 2 easy and delicious ways to make cannolis on your own. Give this a try at the next holiday event. I promise your guests will be impressed, and I would bet they've never had a maple bourbon cannoli. So give it a try if you do. Let me know in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.